All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Talkin' Ball live postgame with Pat Leonard here of the New York Daily News and the Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard podcast. Sitting here inside AT&T Stadium in Arlington. That's the field where the Cowboys just defeated the Giants 27-20. Another loss, another disappointment. A little bit of window dressing at the end there with that extra touchdown from Drew Lock rushing that made the final score look better than the game ended up turning out to be. Dexter Lawrence with a dislocated elbow does not know how long of a timeline this is going to be as far as being out. He entertained a question about whether or not this would potentially be season ending. They only have 5 games left. Obviously, the Giants now at 2-10. You have to imagine that at 2-10, this team is now in jeopardy. Let's say they're playing without Dexter Lawrence for at least 3 of those games. They're in jeopardy of finishing 2-15. And that, of course, would put you in the running for the number 1 pick. But the question now, obviously, as we've been talking about, is we're on firing watch here from Joe Schoen to Brian Daboll, general manager, head coach. And the question is how you can retain a regime that now is not able to compete consistently, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. In this game, you had a scenario and a sequence where the Giants, they score on their opening drive. Drew Lock with that scramble gets them down in there to the 1-yard line, and Tyrone Tracy finishes it off. But after that, on the next 8 offensive drives, Daboll's offense gained 35 total yards on 27 plays. That is just an absurd statistic. And during that stretch, they had 2 turnovers, including the DeMarvion Overshawn interception, returned for a touchdown, 23 yards on that screen pass where Devin Singletary got blown up. 4 punts, a field goal, and an end and a half, run out the clock there. And, really, even though the defense stepped up its effort, and I use that word, effort, stepped up its effort in this game, it didn't make a difference because the Giants just find new ways to be dysfunctional every week. I don't think it does the guys justice. You have to be fair and say they played better and harder, especially on defense, than they did 4 days ago against the Buccaneers. Obviously, that wasn't hard to do given the performance they turned in. But it is, in my mind, not even respectful to them as NFL players to use the barometer of success that they tried harder than they did the last game. I don't think obviously it would be worse if they didn't try at all and they, laid down and this game was 50-0. You could make the argument that the Cowboys aren't good enough to beat anybody 50-0. I think about the context of this too. It's, a Cowboys team that was 0-5 coming in at home. The Giants actually are now the only team in the NFL that doesn't have a home win. They're 0-6 at MetLife Stadium. Remaining games against the New Orleans Saints at home, the Baltimore Ravens at home. Oh, boy. How about that one? At Atlanta Falcons, December 22nd, and then a home game against the Indianapolis Colts and a road game against the Philadelphia Eagles. And God help Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll if Saquon Barkley is going for the rushing record in that game and the Eagles actually are playing guys because they need to win it. I'm curious what you guys think as a fan base about, what this performance showed you. If anything, do you take anything away from it? Do you kind of roll it all up into one that a loss is a loss? And, because that's how I feel in this moment. I feel like this is a game that was 27-20, but, really was 27-13 until a late TD. I remember that game a couple years ago. They had a game here where they scored a late touchdown, and the final score was something like 28-20. But really, the Giants had, no points all game. We had missed tackles show up on the defensive side. The defense did have a turnover forced where they stopped the Dallas Cowboys on a 4th and 1 on that fullback dive. So even though it wasn't a fumble or an interception, they did have a takeaway and a turnover forced, right? And the offense went, I believe, promptly 3 and out in that spot. So very disappointing. My takeaway after the game, I think the number 1 takeaway after the game, I think that you need to know is that, there's a lot of frustration with with inside the Giants organization right now about these lack of results, about their non-competitive in the division. They're not competitive against the Cowboys. Like, this is the worst version of the Cowboys that we've seen. And they're playing Cooper Rush at quarterback, and Zach Martin didn't play. Trayvon Diggs, their top corner, didn't play. A lot of players out, and still just didn't make a difference, didn't matter. The Giants still find ways to lose. And so Daboll at the podium, I thought, was dejected. That's how he came off to me. He was somber. He sounded like a coach who has run out of answers, and he knows it. That's how he was acting. I did ask him if he was concerned about his job security. He said no. That's a similar answer to what Joe Shane has said when asked that question, and talked about, we're proceeding. This is a process, that kind of thing. You wonder whether they're speaking it into existence or trying to speak it into existence and just being confident until they have reason not to, or if they are actually in a spot here where they really do believe that John Mara's vote of confidence is going to mean they're coming back in 2025. We'll get into conversations about whether they deserve that and what you guys think and how you see it. Patrick Evans starts us off by saying, hit that sub button and that like button. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube and on the Believe Network, on the podcast, audio, Spotify, Apple, and here on YouTube. It's PL on NFL. That's the handle on YouTube. And happy Thanksgiving to all, as Patrick notes. Yes, happy Thanksgiving to all of you. I hope you are full as you sit and watch and listen, and you take in my takeaways. I should also note that Theo Johnson, the rookie tight end, came back into the locker room while it was open, and it appeared, I can't speculate on what exactly happened. But what happened is he limped back into the locker room while it was open. So he had been in there, he left the room, then he ends up coming back. And he had his shoes off, he had his shoes in his hands. And when he got back into the locker room, he took them and he threw them like as hard as he could, his shoes, into the wall, kind of screamed out, and then slumped down into a locker and put his head in his hands. It looked like the kind of scene where maybe a guy got a scan and got bad injury news or something like that. But I don't know. So it's impossible to say what it was. Generally the players were not acting like that in the locker room. They weren't acting frustrated with the game the way they were the last game. They were basically talking about, we competed and we had missed opportunities essentially, and the turnovers on offense and things like that. So that's something to take note of. So that's primarily, I think, what you guys need to know as far as Daboll, as far as the players. Bobby Okereke appeared to go and get something checked out after the game as well. Interestingly, they had 3 defensive tackles all leave this game with injuries. Dexter Lawrence with the elbow, Nacho Nunez-Roches, Rakeem Nunez-Roches with a stinger, and DJ Davidson with a shoulder. And so, in the end, Dallas was basically running the clock down and out because they were able to gash the interior of the defensive line. And that was really how they ended up running the clock out, along with that key first down to Brandon Cooks at the end. But one important thing you guys should know as we're talking here live from AT&T Stadium is, as you know, MyBookie sponsors us. It's a sports book. And I've been making people money, honestly. I mean, there have been years where I've been off. But today, right now, 2-0 against the spread, and looking good with the Packers against the Dolphins to sweep Thanksgiving Day. So hopefully you guys parlayed that, made those picks. Hopefully you clicked on the link in my profile and signed up for MyBookie and used my promo code Pat's Picks. Because if you do that, you get a 100% match on what you deposit all the way up to $1,000. So if you make that first deposit and you put $1,000 in there, it will match it with another $1,000 for free right into your account. The picks are hitting. I gave out Kavontae Turpin plus money on 16 plus receiving yards, and he went over it on the first drive. I was almost right on the Devin Singletary touchdown and first touchdown, he started the game over Tyrone Tracy Jr. I had a feeling that it was coming more carries and a more prominent role for Devin Singletary in that sense because of the Tyrone Tracy fumbles the last couple of games. Obviously, Tracy ended up getting that 1-yard run on the goal line, though, so he vultured it from my pick. But the point holds. Go to my bookie, use the Pats Picks promo code. Let's make some money together. Let's tail these Pats picks while I'm hot. I'm sure I'll hit a cold streak, but right now it's working. There's more picks I have coming for this weekend. And so please join me and tail me on those picks. We're also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. You can always see them here on the screen. It is a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally have felt a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today and use the code TalkinBall25, and you'll get 25% off your first subscribe and save order, or use the QR code or TalkinBall25 code. Subscribe and save option. You order one bag, get that. You can cancel out the subscription. No harm, no penalties if you'd like, or you can stay subscribed. I think you will stay subscribed if you try it. I think you'll like it. But boomchaga.com, can't recommend it highly enough. To be honest, I was skeptical about the product and whether it was going to make a difference for me when I met Rich Funk, the founder, and when I tried it. But now I do like it. I swear by it. Also brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, a specialty coffee concentrate, perfect for when you want to make a quick cup of coffee and skip the lines. It takes me less than 10 seconds to make a delicious Estate 98 iced or hot coffee. It's great as a mixer for espresso martinis, and each bottle can make up to 16 cups. Go to estate98.com/talkinball to get an exclusive offer for 80% off your first order. And I have to tell you, those of you who have won the Estate 98 Giants trivia questions here, I've mailed out a bottle to you guys. Everybody says that they like it. And we've seen some orders roll in recently at a higher clip from subscribers to Talkin' Ball because I think people are starting to get a taste and starting to recognize that it can be a really versatile product to use hot and cold. So welcome. Thanks for being here. Thanks for always joining me. Always going to go to the super chats first. Chris Spires sets a good example as always. Chris, thank you so much. You're always dropping the super chats. But I'm always going to go to a super chat first for a question or a comment to read it and address it in the chat because you guys are supporting me. I'm going to support you. Chris says, I'm afraid if we fire the GM and coach, no good GM or coach will want to come here. Yeah, that's an interesting – you're not the only one who has that feeling, Chris, among the fans. I've had other fans say similar things in regards to I don't personally think it's a fair defense to not fire someone who's doing such a poor job that, well, I don't trust the owner to make a good hire the next time, so I don't want to make a change now. I'm not quite sure that is a logical thing that follows, but I understand why the thought process goes there because as a Giants fan, and even, John Mara has kind of intimated, or he has said on the record that he wants to be patient and making changes all the time is not something he wants to do. He wants to be more like his father was, that type of stuff. But I think there's a breaking point for everybody and for every regime and for every coach, general manager, and organization, for owners sitting there as far as an embarrassment goes. I mean, you could debate this about whether did the Giants scoring that late touchdown and not letting this get to 45-0, right? Or 45-10, did that save their jobs for another week, right? You could talk about that, but to me, I know that it's an optics game, it's an optics league, it's an optics organization in a lot of ways, all those things. To me, though, I thought this game was just like a lot of them for the Giants this year. It was a lot of mistakes, not a lot of discipline to how they play, how they can't clean things up, always something going wrong, always somebody shooting them in the foot. Definitely, I think a really depressing thought that there would be a positive takeaway that the team tried harder today. you're a professional athlete. You know, the team has to try hard. That's the bare minimum. All right, let's see. Chris says, going to my first ever Giants game when they play the Falcons. Oh, that's fun. That's a really cool stadium, too. You'll really enjoy that. I wonder who's going to be quarterback in the Falcons in that game. I really want to see Michael Penix start and play a full game. You know, I know they're paying Kirk Cousins a lot of money, but I really do want to see that. I wonder if we'll get to see that at all. Chris is also saying, I would still fire the GM and coach. Got you. So, yeah, you're saying you don't want to go through it again. You're afraid people aren't going to want to take it, but you do still think the change needs to happen. Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with you. Patrick says, it's funny, Neighbors calls for the ball, and he already has 2 drops. Shaking my head. Oh, you were saying that during the game. Yeah. And Neighbors had an interesting quote after the game. I'm sure you guys have seen it by now. But let me make sure I get this read out to you. So let's see. His quote about drops. He said, so Neighbors is a really proud guy. He's a confident guy. So, you know, I like that about him. I think that's a good quality. And I know that the Giants like his confidence. But he essentially said about the drops, like, drops are going to happen. Keep throwing me the ball. He said, I don't care about drops. It's just part of football. I don't care if I drop the ball 6 times. Keep throwing me the ball. So interesting there. Hunter Keller says, happy Thanksgiving, Pat, and loyal listeners to Pat. Yeah, thank you, Hunter. He says, what a damn disgrace this coaching staff is. What are the odds Daboll is canned in the morning? We need to start the turnover now. This is BS. I think there's a chance he does get fired in the morning. You know, there's some thought process among, you know, people watching this game, covering the team, covering the league, who think that because it didn't become a total 45-0 embarrassment, that they could be safe. I thought Daboll was acting like, for lack of a better term, like a dead man walking. You know, I think that what I saw was a coach who just has no more answers. That's what I saw. And actually, as I'm live with you guys, I need to touch up my story here real quick. So I'll read you some of the Brian Daboll quotes as I'm writing it. So as I pointed out in my daily news story, there were signs from the very beginning of this defeat that it was too much to ask for the Giants not to be embarrassed at points of this game. And now Shane and Daboll are both in jeopardy of getting fired at any moment. Daboll was asked if Cohen or John Mara may go back on his recent vote of confidence and vow to try to stay patient with this regime. And he said, no, I don't like the results. Nobody likes the results. But again, I have confidence in the people. We've just got to do better. Then Daboll was asked about his job security, was asked if he's concerned about his job security. No, he said. But in my opinion, Daboll's dejected demeanor at the postgame press conference spoke louder than his words. He knows this could be the end. So let's get to the next comment in the chat. Thank you for being here. This is Talkin' Ball post-game live with Pat Leonard. The Giants lose to the Dallas Cowboys 27-20. Drew Lock ends up final stat line of 21 of 32, 178 yards, no touchdown passes, 1 interception. He did have 57 rushing yards on 4 carries for a touchdown, but also had a lost fumble. Like I said, the Giants had 70 yards on their first drive for a touchdown. And then on their next 8 drives, they gained a total of 35 yards on 27 plays. Not good enough. I actually wanted to. I'm going to look at this while I'm talking to you guys. I wanted to see how many hits Drew Lock took. So Drew Lock was sacked 6 times, and he was hit an additional 14 times. So that was 20 hits that Drew Lock took, plus he scrambled 4 times and was tackled. So that's 24 hits. Drew Lock, funny guy, always has a good sense of humor, and is also pretty helpful when it comes to media. And he said, I asked him about taking so many hits, and he said, I can take it. I'm 230 pounds. And he tapped his belly as he walked off the podium, basically saying because he's heavy enough, he can take the beating. But, man, what a beating that was. To be honest, isn't it a true and fair thing to say that Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, Drew Lock, it's like all these guys, when they go in here behind the Giants offensive line, they really struggle not to take a beating. You know, DeVito couldn't play in this game. He plays in one game, takes a beating. Daniel Jones, obviously, over the years has. And, of course, the injuries on the Giants offensive line haven't helped at all. But, man, the tackle situation right now with Chris Hubbard and Evan Neal. Evan Neal really had a tough time, predictably and as expected, with Micah Parsons, as a lot of people do. But Drew Lock was running for his life. So let's see. All right, let's get into the queue here. Oh, it looks like we have a $20 super chat roll in. Let's get to that. Sorry about some of the background noise here. The background noise going on right now is the people in the stadium cleaning up, the cleaning crews. It's that late here at AT&T Stadium. And what happens is usually in these stadiums, the press boxes are completely enclosed. But here at AT&T Stadium, there are slight holes in these gigantic windows that you're looking through to see the field. And so it allows you to hear enough of the atmosphere and not feel like you're completely detached from it. Obviously, now as we do this, you can hear more background noise behind me. But we will keep going here and bringing you the latest up-to-date information about the Giants here from Arlington, Texas. Patrick says, Pat, we keep blaming the coaches and GM. Mara had a big hand in this. He keeps firing coaches and GMs. Every time you do that, you change the culture, and then they get rid of players that should still be here. Well, in fairness, Patrick, it's the new GM and coach's job then to, like, you don't have to get rid of a guy just because he wasn't your pick, right? And you look at this team, obviously a lot of their better players are still guys that were here when Shane and Dable got here, like Dexter Lawrence and Andrew Thomas, obviously now both of them hurt. But, you know, it's their job to judge that. I don't disagree with you at all, Patrick. The dysfunction and the bad decisions go all the way up to the top to ownership. There's no doubt about that. But I'm operating under the assumption that, you know, the owners aren't going anywhere. They own the team, and they're going to make the decisions about where this goes and what's next. And then you go from there. And so you can only talk about right now the people who are actually going to be held accountable on the chopping block and have those job loss consequences, because John Mara, you know, unless somebody wants to break some news to me, you know, is not selling the team. So you're right, though, that especially from a hiring standpoint, you know, John Mara and the Giants, the Tisch family, like, they have really struggled to make the appropriate hires. And then I've said this before, like, I think, you know, I thought Joe Judge was a good CEO coach. I think he needed more support, like a better GM and a better offensive coordinator, and certainly couldn't have been the person that was involved in the offense. That wasn't his strong suit at all. You know, so they have hired people with good qualities. Pat Shurmur is a good play caller on offense, for example. But it's just like they don't ever fit the pieces of the puzzle correctly together. I do think that from a very basic standpoint, the Joe Shane, Brian Dable hire, there's so much focus on let's have collaboration because Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge didn't collaborate well. But you arranged that marriage yourself as ownership, right? Like that wasn't a Joe Judge choice, or that was the Giants saying, we want to make it work with these two people who don't really have a relationship and turns out are complete oil and water, right? And so those types of mistakes are critically, they undercut the process, and it puts the team and the franchise in a position where they're always chasing their own tail. And so you're right. That's what I'm kind of saying is I'm agreeing with you on that. You're right that that's where the issues start. I mean, are the Giants at the point now where it's as bad as it was when the NFL stepped in and Pete Rozelle, the commissioner, then ended up, appointing George Young to essentially clean up and fix the Giants? Like, are we at that point? And obviously the Giants version of the story goes that essentially Wellington Mara and I think it was his nephew Tim, right, who were the co-owners at the time, and that they couldn't agree. And so I think Wellington wanted George Young, so he kind of whispered it into Roselle's ear and said, hey, can you recommend this guy as if it was your idea? Because if I say it's my idea, then he'll say no. But if it's your idea, he'll say yes. So there's different versions of how that happened. But the bottom line is they went outside, their comfort zone, and that's how they did it. So, are we at that point where the Giants need to go get a lot more, where they need to get a lot more help from somebody and get a pair of fresh eyes? Because I say this all the time about the Giants, and they're not the only one. So, the Giants are far from the only team who fall into this category, but they don't properly self-evaluate. They think they're one thing when they're something else, or they think they're farther ahead than they actually are. And that ends up coloring their decisions and leading them down a path where they think. So here's the best way that I can describe how the Giants make mistakes personnel-wise and how it translates to what you see on the field. They are more the kind of team that, like, let's say they draft, I'm just using as an example, like a Daniel Bellinger or a Theo Johnson or one of these tight ends, right? They draft one of these guys, and it's like you draft a tight end in the 4th round. He starts looking pretty promising in training camp. They're the kind of organization that just as an image that, puts that guy's name on the tight end depth chart and like puts like a check mark next to it. It's like, okay, we have that, right? Like we have that player. We filled that role because they fell in love with their evaluation. They love the player, and, and they go from there. So that's where I think when you do that, when you say, oh, we just drafted an offensive guard, so we have our right guard, and we drafted this tight end, so we have our tight end, and we signed this safety, and we gave him a lot of money, so now we know we're good at safety. You can't think that way. You can't fall in love so much with your own evaluations that you ignore. You have to reinforce depth. Your backups have to be capable to play at a certain level. You also, you can't overlook, and I'm going on a lot of different tangents here as far as how they build their team, but the Giants as a team, like, you need more nasty. You need more nasty on the field. And a lot of the strong intangibles that these that some players on some other teams, like this past week, I've noticed, like the Ravens offensive line, the way those guys play and act and the way they treat their opponents, and some of these quarterbacks, the vibes of like the Baker Mayfields and the Jameis Winstons. Like, you need, when you're evaluating teams and you're building a team, you need to make sure that you're not underestimating all of these qualities. And I think, the frustrations of the Giants giving away or letting walk so many players that were part of the cultural fabric of the character of the locker room, I think has gone a long way to really undercutting any identity. And so when we talk about, when you say, every time you tear it up, you change the culture, to me, they have changed the culture with how they have changed the roster. And I think that's why the culture is worse and why the team is worse. Let's see. Patrick says, we have been talking offensive line since Eli Manning. Tired of hearing that. I know. It's really tough. All right, let's see. Hunter says, lack of leadership on offense. Can't get your linemen settled down. It was 11 offensive penalties. Who teaches the tight ends to block? They need to be fired. Their former tight end coach, Andy Bischoff, I believe he went to the Chargers. He was a good coach. He was one of the coaches who left on his own, right? All these coaches who left this staff on their own. Wink Martindale was the most public, but that was another guy who just left of his own accord. Yeah, I asked Abel about the penalties. I mean, penalties are a coaching issue. Like that falls on coaching, And I'm not just saying Brian Daboll. I'm saying coaches in general. And my question for him, I said, how do you account for 13 penalties? He said some are physical, but the other ones, the pre-snap ones, we have to do a better job there. The offsides, false start, the delay of games, not good enough. I mean, just doesn't have an answer. Daniel says, happy Thanksgiving. Does this warrant a Daboll firing? It was a blowout until Locke ran it in with 3 minutes left. What are you expecting to happen? Daniel, I'm going to say, even though the optics looked better with the final score with that late touchdown, I think we see something here. I personally think something happens. No one has told me that that's going to happen. Just reading the tea leaves of how Daboll was acting, it's a completely dead environment. He seems like he's resigned to whatever happens. Jonathan says, I don't think the Giants quit on Daboll. I just think they're not a good football team. Joe has failed to give Daboll talent to compete in the league. The GM needs to go, but I can live with Daboll. I think it's possible both get fired soon. I know they don't want to do it, but I think it's possible at this point. Like I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow on Black Friday and be confident they're not getting fired. But knowing the Giants, knowing that John Mara has already said he gave this vote of confidence and he's not going to make an in-season change, he might just try to stick to that and get to the end of the year. I just don't know how at this point he can have confidence that these are the guys that he wants developing his new quarterback and picking his new quarterback and developing his next team. I just don't see it. Patrick says, I think they played hard tonight. It's been a while since I've seen them play this hard. Nick says, if Drew Lock has been given a fair opportunity in training camp to be the starter, I bet he beats out Daniel Jones and Cutlets. Dude got a raw deal from the team, in my opinion. From what I saw, he got a fair enough chance to show that he was good, that he was really good working with the twos to maybe compete with Daniel. And he didn't play that well in camp. Neither did DeVito. But I agree with you that he got screwed from the sense of like Daboll does this thing where he basically just gives the starter all the reps in practice. And so like I asked Drew Lock tonight, I asked him, I said, how hard was it emotionally to be passed over last week for the third stringer? And at that point that they're not showing confidence in you. And then suddenly you have to be the guy. How hard was that? He said, not really. But then he said, I came into this excited to go show what I could do. I didn't have enough playing time in the system, like I said weeks ago. This is one of my first times being able to come in and play a full game with these guys and show them what I can do. Minus the turnovers and a few things, it was up and down. Some good, some bad. Happy I got some time and reps. Bank these, and I'll be ready for the next opportunity when it comes. Interesting decision here. I mean, neither one is an ideal option. But it's like, what do you pick for the Saints game? Do you pick Tommy DeVito and less of a chance to score points, but maybe not as loose with the ball? Or do you pick Drew Lock, who puts more points on the board, but also can have the killer turnover here and there? Nick says, great Thanksgiving game today. Good call. Jonathan said, do you think Daniel Jones wins this game? Oh, good question. Well, what we definitely have seen from Daniel Jones is that he was capable of making and has made the same kind of mistakes that Drew Lock made today. So maybe not. Lock also did use his legs, 52 rushing yards and a touchdown, or in the 50s with a touchdown. So it's not like he didn't get mobile, and he did make some plays. I think Locke, honestly, looked a lot like Daniel Jones did on this team today. I think that'd be a fair way to put it, right? I do think whoever played quarterback today was going to get smashed. Patrick says, now you see why Dable didn't start Drew Lock. Well, like I said, it's like, I know the last touchdown was nothing, but like they did score 20 points compared to 7 last week, but then they had more turnovers and a pick 6, right? So it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Who would you rather have as a head coach, Dable or Matt Eberflus? Now that guy's a horrible coach, Jonathan says. Yeah, I was saying that Eberflus was giving Dable some cover early on with that incredible mismanagement at the end of that game. I think Eberflus has to get fired after that. I mean, that was just, how do you even explain that? You can't. Those are both coaches, I think, in the same spot. The teams know that it's over. They don't really believe. They're just playing out the season, playing out the string. And both coaches are showing with different gaffes or malpractice or mismanagement that they're just not the guy for the job. Ashtray says, Drew Lock is clearly not the answer. Our offense looks in shambles. Rich says, so we paid $5 million for that backup while we couldn't spend a few more million for Saquon, for real? Yeah, good call. Dan says, the entire team stinks. It's not just Lock. Patrick says, Shane Bowen needs to go. Don't think he is a good defensive coordinator. Yeah, in fairness to Shane, like, how could you expect him to change it all? Like the idea that hire was going to reinvigorate and change a defense that led the league in takeaways last year with a very experienced defensive coordinator. It just never made any sense. Dan says, good thing they got that late score in so they could say they lost another one-score game. Right, exactly. Now you see how they operate. Defense is horrible, Nick says. Agree. Dan says he's got guys that were solid players for us last year looking like they forgot how to play football this year with a bad scheme. The strength of the scheme was supposed to be stopping the run. This rush defense gets absolutely gashed week after week. How about the defensive line, too? I mean, a gaping hole on 2nd and 21 for a 22-yard rush in the first half by Rico Dowdle. How the hell can you do that? Embarrassing. Complete free run through the first level of the defense. And like I said, top 3 D tackles all went down tonight. Dexter Lawrence elbow, DJ Davidson shoulder, Nacho with a stinger. Nick says, now we know who was the better coach between Dable and Wink. I told you. Candyman says, now we can fire them both. GM says, Locke gave up 14 points. Dude was not good for 3.5 quarters. Dan says, I don't think there was any question that Wink was a good coach just based on what he did in Baltimore. Dable scapegoated him like he scapegoated Kafka with the play calling. No doubt. D-Kid says the quality of this roster is appalling. The Giants are the worst team in the league on every level. Leaving the fate of this franchise in the hands of the current regime is no longer an option. Exactly. D-Kid, you see right through everything. More criticism of Bowen here. Barb says, happy Thanksgiving. We won't win a revamp of the O-line. Every good team has a good O-line. Dan says, agreed, Dable should be fired, but how can we trust Mara to make the right hire? Every coach and GM he's hired since he's taken over has been a miss. Patrick says, I agree with you on the offensive line, Barb. Yeah, right. So Barb says, we won't win without a revamp of the offensive line. No doubt. They need, and this is when I talk about how they build their team. It's the problem of checking the box like we're done, right? So you draft Evan Neal and you say, now we have our right tackle. Now we have our right tackle. Check, right? But you can't do it like that, right? You can't say, now we have our right tackle. Check. It's not that simple because the bottom line is, what if that player doesn't pan out? You need a strong backup. You need to create competition on your roster. You need to evaluate the players better and make a better pick at number 7 for one. But you can't assume that that's going to be a hit. You have to keep preparing things with your team accordingly. You have to have depth. You have to have competition on your roster. And, you need to have, like, the Tyrone Tracy Jr. pick. Of course, he's had some really costly turnovers. But you need to make more of those picks where you use a fourth or a fifth rounder on a guy who becomes a contributor. Like there's teams all over the league with guys who were fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh round picks and undrafted free agents factoring in a significant way, or even if they're not starters, just being very capable to go in when asked if there's an injury to a starter and putting their best foot forward and helping the team. The Giants just don't have enough of that. Daniel says, watching the Vikings coach press conference about Daniel Jones shows a stark contrast with Dable, a good coach versus a bad coach. Well, and just a guy with a clear and obvious, like you can see when watching Sam Darnold and watching, if you guys watched, I think it was there a Vikings Hard Knocks last year or was the Amazon show? Kevin O'Connell really comes off relatable and with Kirk Cousins. Like just clearly a guy who puts, confidence in his players, seems relatable. Also, here's the thing about a coach. Now, it is 100% true that in a lot of ways, and Daniel, thanks for the super chat. In a lot of ways, the better the players, the better the coaches, right? Like good players make good coaches. But scheme can help players look like better players. And players know when a scheme is not making them better. So, the Giants defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, what you guys are talking about with your frustrations with him is that you can see, even if you don't know all the X's and O's, ins and outs of every single thing, you can see, right, that there are plays where the offense's scheme is taking advantage of the Giants' lack of scheme. Do you agree with that? One thing that Wink Martindale does really well, and I had to learn about this, I didn't fully understand it at an advanced level, is you have to, as a defensive coordinator and as a defense, you have to attack an offense's pressures. So what that means is it's not just about who you're blitzing and when you're blitzing and situationally and trying to get to the quarterback and creating like a one-on-one mismatch here and there. It's also about, okay, I know how the Cowboys like to protect on 3rd and long. I know what schemes they like to run. I know where they like to send the tackle, or I know on 2nd and 4 that they like to pull their guard and run a trap or, whatever it is. So that tells you how the run defense, like on a run defense, how do we scheme up this run blitz so that we are anticipating where the block is coming from and we're shooting the gap and we're one step ahead because we're anticipating how they situationally call this and how they actually try to protect it with their line and with their backs and with their tight ends. So Martindale is really good at that. And Bowen does not do that well. He does not, knock the opposing offense off of its plan enough by staying a step ahead. Patrick says, I think we draft a quarterback in the draft and some O-linemen and free agency pick up defensive players. What do you think? And you sound sick. Get better. Oh, yeah, you noticed, Patrick. Yeah, definitely feeling under the weather. The travel will do that to you, but in good spirits. And other than continuing to cover losing football and 7-game losing streak. But I agree with you. I think offensive line in the draft for sure, quarterback for sure. And I do think that we're going to have a new regime here because I don't see how you have confidence in what they're doing after this. Reminder, our sponsors here, MyBookie, Boom Chaga, and Estate 98. Go to the link in my social media profiles. And I know I say this to you guys, but I mean it. The best way to support the channel and Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard here on the Believe Network and on my PL on NFL YouTube page is to support our sponsors. So go open an account with MyBookie if you like to bet on football. Click on the link, use the promo code PATSPICKS, and you'll get a 100% match on your first deposit up to $1,000, minimum $50, I believe. You'll get a $10 casino chip as well. And what you can do there is like you can deposit, let's say $500. You'll get an extra $500 for free and then have $1,000 in your account to play with. And right now I'm kind of on a little bit of a heater. Went 3-0 last week on Pat's picks. And I'm about to go 3-0 here on Thanksgiving. So that's 6-0 in my last 6 picks. So I'm making people money. What are you waiting for? Also, I'm not sure if this deal is going to keep lasting. I think they might drop it soon to like 50% match instead of 100% match. So I would go get it if you're interested in waffling and kind of thinking about it. Also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract, loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. Like I said, has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today, place your first order, and use that discount code TalkinBall25 or access it through the QR code on your screen right here, and you'll get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. So go to boomchaga.com, start feeling the difference. And brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, a specialty coffee, perfect for when you want to make a quick cup and skip the lines. Takes me less than 10 seconds to make a delicious Estate 98 iced or hot coffee. It's great as a mixer for espresso martinis, and each bottle can make up to 16 cups. Go to estate98.com/talkinball to get an exclusive offer for 80% off your first order. All right. Dave G says there is no way Mara keeps this regime after going 2-15. I agree. D-Kit says the Evan Neal experiment should be over, even if he continues to play out the string. There is nothing to salvage there. I agree with that as well. Let's see. Dan says, Barb, they've only been trying to rebuild the O-line for the past 15 years. That's true. Dan says Mara is clueless. Jose says, seems like half the fan base wanted Mara to not interfere. Well, he's not, and some are still unhappy. Jose, no, that's a fair point. I think, but so this is my argument too for like, he's not interfering. And if it's going poorly, then you just have to try to change something up. That could mean getting more involved again. I think the not involved part that really has to sting for John Mara is the Saquon Barkley situation because, this guy's got going on an absolute tear and he's possibly going to win MVP, and the Giants are barely scratching out points every week. And they essentially handed their rival a great player. And now the Eagles are, one of like 5 teams who can win the Super Bowl. I mean, it's insane. While the Giants are on their way to having the number 1 pick and being 2-15. I mean, it's a total disaster. But Jose, to your point, that's fair for sure. But that John Mara must feel like there's, what do I do? I meddle, doesn't go, or I don't think I meddle, but I get involved in all this stuff. It doesn't work out. So then I take my hands off the wheel, and that doesn't work out. Letting people make decisions that, in my heart of hearts, I know might backfire, right? So again, does it bring up the conversation of do the Giants need outside help? Dan says he's the only common denominator in all of the failed regime hires. Patrick says it's not Daboll, it's Shade. He got rid of 2 leaders, Saquon on offense and McKinney on defense. Obviously also Julian Love, Leonard Williams, even guys like John Feliciano, Nick Gates, list goes on. Chronicle says, update, we are still terrible. Patrick says, at least I've heard Daboll accept responsibility. I've never heard Shane accept responsibility. Except finally at this last press conference, Shane suddenly was sounding like he was, accepting responsibility all of a sudden for, oh, yeah, we miscalculated this and we got this wrong. That's part of the reason I think that they're on their way out. They're going to get fired too is I feel like Shane had his tail between his legs at their last press conference. Like, seriously, he's usually overconfident and defensive. And he was basically saying, yeah, we screwed this up. We misjudged this. We felt basically overconfident after that first season. And I don't know how you get overconfident and you misread what your success is off of a 9-7-1 season. But Patrick says, sounds like you need an old fashioned. Now you're talking. Jonathan says, Pat, do you have faith in Mara that he can make the right hire if he gets rid of the coach and GM. I think if the right people get involved, if he solicits the right advice, yes. I think what he has to do, though, is get more structure back into the building. I don't think there's enough structure. One thing about the way the locker room is right now is, if you noticed, the locker room exploded in frustration last week after that game, and they ripped the coach, the GM, or not the coach and the program, right? They didn't love the direction of the team, and the problem with being a coach who kind of coddles players and is more friends with them than their boss is then when it comes time to, rein it in and be stern and provide more structure, you can't suddenly go from being lackadaisical and being loose to tightening it up and acting like now we have to be this way. Now I'm gonna be more of a disciplinarian, right? Players don't respond to that. That's actually what happened with Pat Shurmur. Was he was one way, and then when he was starting to feel the heat, he went the other way, and he and Mike Shula, the offensive coordinator at the time, started cracking down on guys, and the players were like, "This is totally disingenuous. This isn't who you are. You're acting like a different person and coach because your job's on the line." So Dable's in a position now where it's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're winning, everything's good and golden when you act like that and you coach like that. But when you're losing, you can't turn it back to the disciplinarian type. Nick says Dable and Shade have to go. Peterstown says Maris sitting in the owner's box looking disheveled. How does he not see that Dable and Shane have lost his team? Time to pull a Fred Wilpon and let Dable and Shane take a commercial flight home. Undefined says people still think it's the quarterback. If they sign on to another year of this mess, they are insane. Nick makes a good point here. Fans have to stay home. Only way to get our point across. You're right. That is what John Mara typically responds to the most, is the seats being empty. That's how his father was. The Mara family, they respond to, if nothing else, the fans. And that was something Wellington, John's father, believed in, was the fans will tell you. And you're absolutely right. That could be what pushes it over the edge if they don't make a change now. George says, when do you think they will get fired, Pat? George, I personally think it's possible it could happen tomorrow, Black Friday. I do. I don't think that's impossible. No one has told me that's going to happen. I'm not reporting that's going to happen, but I am telling you that my prediction is I think it's on the table tomorrow. I don't think them getting the 20 points saves their jobs. Dan says it's not. But sorry, George. What I'm saying is I don't think scoring 20 points definitely saves their jobs. I think it's possible it extends their staying on as GM and coach for a little bit longer, maybe. But and if they don't fire them now, then nobody showing up at the Saints game and losing to the Saints next week could be the thing that packs it in and leads to everybody getting fired for sure. And maybe losing 60-0 to the Ravens the next week, like they're going to probably, that could be what does it with nobody in the building, those types of things. But I think it's on the table now. Dan says it's not just the quarterback. Jones was bad, though, missing throws to wide open receivers, refusing to throw downfield, committing horrible turnovers. Can't have that in year 6. His time was up. I'm a season ticket holder. I won't be going to any more games this year. And I will be looking to unload my PSLs in the offseason. Wow. Dan, you're serious about that, huh? Holy cow. Peterstown, that's the type of stuff that gets to ownership, those types of comments. Peterstown says, Pat, if Mara wants to keep this regime and Tisch does not, who gets the final say when it's all said and done? Well, it's the Tisch family and the Maras. Tisch family's been quiet. To me, this is more a John Mara decision at this point. Typically, though, like when he's waffling and wondering whether he should do it, but he in his gut he knows, typically Tish is the one who kind of pushes it over the edge. So it'd be interesting because I feel like Tish is more receded into the background now compared to what we've seen in the past. D-Kid says, I can't wait until Joe Shane says we had another one-score game that could have gone either way. I know. Evan says, why do us fans deserve to watch this terrible product for so long? When is enough enough? Nick says, I don't blame you one bit, Dan. It's highway robbery, the money they charge for PSLs, and the trash product they put out. Kyler says, need to see what Kafka has. Fire Baldy. People saying he lost play calling. Daboll wanted to call plays all along. He just waited to year 2 after he got his feet under him. I want Kafka without Brian Daboll influences. George says, Pat, what are your sources telling you? To keep my eyes and ears open. I do think that today was a day where if they only scored 3 or 7 or 6 or 7 points, then I think I would be sitting here saying, like, everybody should wake up on Friday expecting firings. Again, it's possible that the optics of scoring 20, including a late meaningless touchdown, helps extend saving their jobs another week or a couple of weeks or to the end of the season. But I don't think that's the right way to go about things as an organization. I think the score in this game, the score doesn't reflect the way the game went. Joey B checks in with $10. Thank you so much, Joey. Always supporting me, man. As Joey said on Instagram, said something like him or not, he's always on the money. So that's going to be my new motto. Human says Drew Lock should have been the starting quarterback all season. D. Linder says, really don't need that personal info about Theo Johnson. That is your BS opinion. I don't agree with that, D. I don't think I outed any personal information there about Theo Johnson. That's just a scene in the locker room. I'm just telling you guys that he looked really upset, and I'm not speculating about what it is. I'm just telling you what I saw. I know he's been battling a back injury. I know that he had his shoes off and he was limping very badly, and he looked really frustrated. So I'm just telling you that in my experience, that type of thing after a game when no one else was acting that frustrated about the result, it's probably something related to him specifically. I don't know what it is, but I'm saying, like, that could easily be a reaction to getting a scan and, some sort of injury news. But I don't know. I'm being honest about I don't know. So, all right, let's see. Mo says the offense looked more or less the same with DeVito Locke versus the $47 million man. Dan says they didn't play like a team that has quit on their coach today. They just played like a terrible team, which they are. Mo says, let's give Locke 68 starts. Only then will we know if he's the guy or not. It's only fair. That's funny, Mo. That's funny. No, my only problem was with how they did it with Daniel at the end. That was all. Obviously, it's time to move on from him next season. Giant Goofball says, even then, Mo, some will say we gave up too quickly on him and didn't give him a chance to succeed. Dan says we may as well give Tim Boyle a look at this point. Tony says, this is getting really hard to watch. I've been a diehard Giants fan for over 40 years, and this is bad. Time to clean house all the way down to the cafeteria lady. Daniel says, Pat, no way Daboll and Shane will survive this debacle. Let's see. Dr. Garrett says, happy Thanksgiving, Pat. Right back at you, doctor. Your boy Javi says 2-15 is the way to go at this point, Pat. The organization is broken. We need a new quarterback, GM, and coach. No holdovers. Garrett says Shane has to be dead man walking. Don't want him getting another draft. Let's see. Mo says without Jones here, they can bring in 2 O-linemen along with a quarterback and a rookie contract, and he thinks the team is closer than we think. That's an optimistic look there. Goofball says, with Neighbors, Tracy, and a top pick, along with it being a large market, this job will look attractive to candidates. Interesting. Simeon says, poor coaching. Garrett says, not that Daboll hasn't had his own issues, but he is stuck working with a horrible roster of Shanes. The bottom line on where the blame goes is, and you're hinting at it here, the bottom line is you can't excuse either the GM or the coach from blame, because the GM is involved in everything, has his hands in everything. It's basically like a baseball general manager setup. And also, so it's impossible to fire Dable and not Shane, because Shane, everything about the team is Shane's design. And he's in the locker room talking to players, and he does film session watches and all. Like, you just can't separate him from the product that we see on the field, And as far as Dable goes, I mean, we've had the coaching dysfunction, which accounted for a lot of turnover on the staff. He's been a part of all the major decisions in lockstep with Joe Shane. And here's the thing. Collaboration is all well and good, but you can't push that we're collaborative, and always sit at the press conferences next to each other. And, we're in it together. We're both working together, And then when it's time to pay the piper and time for accountability and responsibility, it's like, well, I was only involved in X, Y, and Z, right? You can't play that game. They're both responsible. Joey B says, Pat, are you sick? Yes. I think it's just like a cold, but yes. I don't know why we're surprised. He said, we suck. Heads need to roll. We need a great draft. And unfortunately, I don't believe the staff can do so. Tank and reset. Anyone in here talking shit to Pat can leave. Appreciate you, Joe. Let's see. Thank you guys for being here. Strong numbers again in our Talkin' Ball post-game live with Pat Leonard here from AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. It's always annoying. You can't say like the Giants won or lost in Dallas, because they technically weren't in Dallas. It's Arlington, Texas. Let's see. Simeon says lack of talent is one thing. Not being smart and disciplined is all about leadership. Team lacks leadership, says Mo. Saquon and McKinney were leaders. Dex is the only leader on this team. And he's struggling there too, to me, with the weight of it all. Javi says, Pat, I think the Giants should consider hiring Parcells, Coughlin, and Belichick as consultants to right the ship. Interesting. Extreme times call for extreme measures. It's a stretch, but is it plausible? I don't hate that idea, Javi. You could run the risk of staying too much in the family, so to speak. But, I definitely think your first call should be to Bill Belichick to test the waters for sure. As far as like your next coach, I'm not saying he will be the next coach, but that would be a call. But I like where your head's at. But you don't want to stay so much in the family that you're not thinking outside the box and changing your ways either. So it's a balance. Let's see. Dr. Garrett says Evan Neal looks like he's in slow motion every time he's on camera. NYOG says happy Thanksgiving, Pat. Same to you. They are just not buttoned down. I'm glad Mara was there to see this in person. He's got to know this isn't going to get better. I totally agree. Simeon says, I was surprised Mara traveled to see this game instead of being at home with his family. He had some family with him here that came with. Garrett says, Pat, worst death stare, Shermer or Dable when you asked about a job security a few weeks back? Shermer definitely kind of like basically bodied me in the locker room after that. So Shermer, even though Dable's was strong in that after that Washington game. Most Illa says Giants will go 0-6 in the division. Fire everyone. I agree. Thanks for the super chat. Patrick says, Pat, call it an early night, bro, and get some rest, but have that old-fashioned when you're done here. Yeah, that's the debate going on in my head is, do I have the old-fashioned or do I have a cup of tea, All right, yeah, let's go through the questions here, see if I can answer some good ones or some new ones. Interesting point here by NYOG. He says, after watching that offensive line today, that injury policy was in jeopardy if Jones was still out there because of the offensive line. Fair point. Tim says, Pat, hi, thanks for continuing to excel with great unbiased beat reporting. How do you think Mara would mesh with an accomplished executive like a John Dorsey? I think well. I think John Mara, like, you can get along with John Mara. Like, he can get along with people he hires, and he wants to hire experienced and strong personnel men and personnel executives and people. You know, I would, before Joe Schoen hire, you could say that there was reluctance to give up too much control, but did feel like hiring Joe Schoen was handing over more power and say so than Mara and the Giants normally did. So they basically tried that, but I would say one thing I would say is that I feel like Joe Schoen has folded into being an in-house Giants person, if that makes sense. Like, it wasn't enough of an outside viewpoint and wasn't enough of a fresh look. Like, he more belongs as one of the people with the Giants who thinks the same way they do, if that makes sense. Let's see. Ernest says, God bless you. You too. KTS says, Shane made other teams better and the Giants worse. Intel, what's up? Good to see you. KTS makes a great point here. The players are the culture. Saquon, X, Julian Love, Leo are the culture. Time to clean house. Let's see. Intel says, thank you, Cowboys, for giving us our quarterback. Let's see. JS says, this is what the Giants deserve for pushing Coughlin into retirement. Simeon says, since Coughlin, has Mara hired anyone that wasn't a first-time head coach? That's a good point. Ben McAdoo, Pat Shurmur, Joe Judge, Brian Daboll. So, yeah, they've all been first-time head coaches. It's a good point. Interesting thing is, I don't know how he would have done here, but Dan Quinn was a guy that they had really zeroed in on during the search that resulted in Daboll, and he pulled his name out and ended up staying in Dallas before then going eventually to Washington. So they were looking in that direction at one point. Good point there, Simeon. Really good point. Dog Quinn Bros says, I agree we need more nasty, 100%, definitely. Javi says, culture is established by owners, not by employees. GM and coach are employees. Ownership needs to commit to developing talent past the first contract. Turnover isn't good for any kind of business. And YOG says, broadcast was rubbing the Giants' nose in the what Saquon rushing TDs versus the entire Giants team, and McKinney's in total versus the Giants team. All right, let's see what else I got. Hunter says, losing Dexter for the rest of the year possibly hurts way more than talent because losing his leadership on field for a team that lacks it. Well, it's also just he's their best player. So it just makes everybody recognize that it's going to be that much harder to win at all. Tim, yes, I think they should fire Daboll. Should they name Belichick? I don't know. I think that should be their first call for sure. I mean, at this point, what do you have to lose? I would. But again, we talked about this. You have to change elements of the organization if you're going to hire Bill Belichick. He's going to have certain terms. George says, Pat, if the Giants draft a quarterback and don't drastically improve the line and receiving core, the rookie quarterback will not last 6 games next year. Yeah, exactly. It's just a horrible team. Team is a joke, says Evan. I don't see a way to fix any of their issues with Daboll and Shane in charge. Time for a change. A420 says the only thought rolling around Mara's head is, do I trust Shane and Daboll with this highly valuable draft pick, right? Michael, Dexter couldn't say whether or not he was out for the season. He said he didn't know yet on the timeline, but he did address a question. Like, he was asked, if you are out for the season, what do you think about that? And he said, it would hurt if I was because I want to be out there. So he did entertain the idea that it's possible. But we're waiting to hear more. Also waiting to hear if there's something to the Theo Johnson thing injury-wise or not. We don't know. Simeon says Dable would make a heck of an OC, but he's not a head coach at this time. Well, I actually think his play calling and his offensive acumen has been kind of exposed. AJ says we need a head coach, not an OC. Vrabel is still young. Stanley says, Pat, why is Malik Neighbors calling the team out, but he's dropping way too many passes? 21 needs to mature. That'd be my answer for you. Candy says, Pat, would you be happy with Gruden as our coach? No, he's a little bit too eccentric for me at this point. Patrick says, how about Vrabel, Pat? What do you think? Interesting. I think I've been underwhelmed by, the Tennessee Titans coaching staff additions to the Giants. I don't feel like they have improved the team. So if he came in and Shane Bowen was going to stay as the defensive coordinator and those kind of things, I don't know. But I do think he has the qualities of the type of coach that the Giants could use. Keith says, Pat, how do you fix 2 botched drafts and multiple mishandled deals with stars? Why is there a belief they can fix this long-term setback? I don't think there is a belief, to be honest with you. I think that the team we're seeing on the field right now is not a part of any process. It is the result of all of those mistakes. That's how I see it. So I don't think you can have a belief in it. I think if they didn't make a change, it would be purely because they don't want to go through another search. Barb says perfectly put on the roster, Pat. Can't just check a box and think, hey, we got our guy. That's it. You're spot on. No doubt. What happened to Deonte Banks? He had a rib injury and didn't play, was not able to play. Javi says, hope you feel better, Pat. You need to sip on some warm boom chaga, no doubt. Let's see. Dogcoin Bro says, great teams have 4th, 5th, and 7th round picks that perform like rabid dogs. That first round is jinx, man, rarely worth the money. Stanley says Joe Shea needs to be fired by the weekend. Daniel says, Pat, how come none of the players on the Giants develop and never get better? The Giants don't coach up their players. That's coaching. NYC says the press is trying to speak the coach getting fired into existence. The GM and the coach don't seem worried. See, I don't agree with that. I'm just responding. They've lost 7 games in a row. I don't think that's like if they had won 7 games in a row, I'd be talking about how well they were coaching. They've lost 7 in a row, so I'm talking about their jobs are on the line. That's all. It's not really more complicated than that. Shane can't evaluate talent, Simeon says. I don't want him drafting for this team again. Let's see. Giant Blue Blood says, what is going on with the pass rush on this team? Burns and Kayvon are seeing way too many one-on-ones versus average at best OTs to not get sacks. Yeah, how about Thibodeau's day today? Had an offside. They had 3 and out on the first Cowboys drive, and he jumps off sides and kills it, gives an automatic first down, and then the Cowboys get a field goal. He shoves Cooper Rush in the back hard like a cheap shot, takes a 15-yard personal foul penalty, screaming in the official's face down on the goal line at one point, basically needed Dable to come out and try to calm him down and needed Burns to try to calm him down. Very strange. Think about this. Their first-round picks have been Kayvon, under Joe Shane and Brian Dable, have been Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal, Deonte Banks, and Malik Neighbors. Scott says everybody in the league thought that Evan would be a good pick at 7. I know there were even some people with the Giants who preferred Charles Cross with the Seahawks. Let's see. Bookend Tackle says Dable's offense haven't been great other than with Josh Allen throughout his career. So maybe Josh made him look better than he was. That's my takeaway. Pat, would you be in favor of Deion Sanders being the new head coach of the Giants and they draft Shedeur Sanders? No, that scares me. I'm not quite sure. That might be ceding more control than as far as like the public image, who's speaking for the team. But who knows? I mean, definitely something to be said for, hey, can this guy build a culture that we'd be proud of? But does Sanders share the same kind of is he, he seems to, I think he would fit somewhere flashier. Like, I don't know if the Giants are the fit, going back to when he was a player and during his draft process with not really wanting to play the Giants game with all their tests, and that kind of stuff and how he was being evaluated. Also extremely free with how he speaks and can step in it. So, I don't know. I mean, listen, if coaches are having success and you think that they can create a positive culture and progress in your organization, you have to entertain the idea. But, I think I would rather go with an experienced NFL coach if I was going, it's like if you're talking about, well, they keep hiring first-time head coaches, do you hire a Deion Sanders or do you go get someone who's coached in the NFL before and bring back some structure, I don't know who the new GM and coaches would be. I have to think about that. We've talked a lot about it. I think the first call needs to be to Belichick just to start it out. I do think someone brought up at one point the idea of, like, if you hired a head coach and they wanted to bring Martindale back as defensive coordinator, that they would like that. And, I don't disagree with that. I think that was a huge loss for this team. You could see why. Hunter says Theo hopefully is all good. He started to turn into a decent player. Still raw, though. Nick says, what about bringing in Spags? I hope Spags gets his shot. I'm not quite sure he's a head coach. I think, honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with him rolling it out and staying as a defensive coordinator. And he's going to be in the Hall of Fame as a defensive coordinator, as a coach, in my opinion. Javi wants them to go the Bill Cowher route. He's old, but probably still has what it takes to whip this team into shape. Word is always that he really loves his life being on TV and his new routine, but I hear you. Stanley says, Pat, Brian Burns is a bust of a trade. The guy can't tackle, and he's not getting after the quarterback. He's playing through a bunch of injuries, but listen, when they made that trade and signed him to that contract, I said it was a desperate move, not a guy who stops the run. Seemed like an overinvestment. You could have used that money and spread it around and done a lot more with it, I thought. But I like the person. I think he's a good culture guy, but certainly not getting, your money's worth there. But that's not Brian Burns' fault. I think they overpaid him. Brett says, I thought Evan Neal was too big, but I want him in cross. Here's the thing about the Evan Neal evaluation, too. Obviously, one of his struggles was mental and maturity-wise coming out. Shane seems to really miss on the intangible stuff with these guys, or he just ignores it and thinks that talent will rule over the intangibles or the lack thereof. And I think it's really bit them in the butt. Tommy says, Pat, is it talent, coaching, or organization in order? Geez. Well, I mean, by nature, it starts at organization and then goes to talent and then goes to coaching typically when everything's wrong. I think the way I see it right now is I think talent is their biggest problem. And then coaching and organization are tied. I'm not going to say one of them is not much of an issue. Brick City says Giants had Poles and Brian Flores in their hands back in 2022, but chose the wrong team. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. There were a lot of good candidates in there. It's a shame that, then the Flores one took such a nasty turn. because it's a shame it took a nasty turn, and now you have the lawsuit and all of that because, that's a coach that I would have liked to see. And really from a culture standpoint and being a leader and that kind of thing, I think Flores has a lot to offer. Tiger, I missed this. You said happy Thanksgiving and thank you, military/police, paramedics, firefighters, etc. Amen to that. Brett said 9 carries for Tracy Howard. How is that possible when you have turnovers that lead to touchdowns and 3 and outs? That is partly how it's possible. Also falling behind. Joey B, can you type your comment about Brady again? I think I missed that one. Type that in again into the queue, please. Lane says, why is Dable getting blamed more than Shane? The roster is regressing and can't do much without a real quarterback. Dable not given a fair shot at all. I think they're both catching blame. I think they both deserve blame. I think they work as a tandem, and I think they've both had problems and issues that have led to what we see now. Lewis had heard the North Carolina Tar Heels were going to contact Deion Sanders. Barb says, I don't think Deion wants to leave Colorado. Collusion says Wink was a major loss. It's clear every day. No doubt. Huge point there. Again, out scheming. You have to be able to out scheme and out coach the other team and give your players an advantage. Lane, thank you for that super chat, by the way. Let's see. Iconic says, is the house burning down now? Did tonight give them a little more time since they had some fight? Not sure. I think from what I can tell, John Mara did not look, what you saw on the broadcast, he did not look very happy. So I think anything's on the table. Jeff says John Lynch turned the Niners around in 1 year. Again, there's a coach who can out scheme on one side of the ball. Joe says, I don't think the defensive coordinator is doing a good job at all. His scheme isn't good for Burns or anyone on this team, not like how Wink had them, no doubt. Totally agree. Joey B said that Brady tried to shame Daniel Jones on air for abandoning his teammates, but that injury clause is why he left. He's never going to suit up again. I hope Brady trips in his Uggs. Such a dork. Definitely seemed like a defense of Brian Daboll there, too, a guy that he had worked with before with the Patriots. So definitely seemed like Brady was sticking up for his buddy there. Cutabang says, hey, Pat, question, if you were Mara and had to choose one option, would you keep staff, draft quarterback, or clean house, not take QB, take best player available, and bridge QB? I would do the second one. Simeon says you can't quantify intangibles, so if it isn't on a spreadsheet, Shane can't see it. Man, that's a really intelligent way to put it, Simeon. AJS wants a defensive coach. Got to get back to old Giants football. Joe says, what do you think about Lou Riddick? I'd be interested to see what he could do. But at this point, for the Giants, I think they need experience rather than first-timer. Stanley says, what do you think about Pete Carroll? Like Belichick, he's old, but a guy who can provide culture, structure, and also keep it loose at the same time. But I don't know. I don't know if he's going to end up coaching again. I could be wrong about this, but I feel like there's more confidence Belichick is coaching again than Pete Carroll. But we'll see. Mr. Godfrey says, it's brutal living in Dallas being a Giants fan. Tiger says, get healthy, Pat. Thank you. You said Kutta says Wink wasn't all that great either. I totally disagree. I think that his game plans and how he attacked specific matchups was a major reason for them going to the playoffs in 2022. And I think them leading the league in takeaways, tying for the league lead in takeaways was, I think that was what was most important was that they had a chance to compete in a lot of those games because of the defense. And really last year, the offense couldn't score any points. It couldn't move the ball. So you were asking the defense essentially to win every game, all 4 quarters, all week. Yeah, I don't think that's true. Cutta says players had issue with Wink already. No, I mean, well, Xavier McKinney bucked when he held him accountable publicly, but, holding guys accountable is what you need to do. And McKinney, if you remember, responded with the best half of a season he's ever had after he was held accountable. And now on another team, he's playing his best ball because he grew from that. Brett says Wink's defense took us to the playoffs, not Barkley and not Jones late, no doubt. Saul says the real score was 27-10, and Dallas packed it in and traded time for yards, no doubt. Lane says, has locker room morale gotten better since last week? They tried their best to clean it up to put a better product on the field on national TV here. But it is kind of a sense of it's like they got a moral victory today because they played harder than Sunday. Stanley says the reason why teams are running the Giants defense at will is because Burns and Thibodeau are horrible run defenders. Also, they don't have depth at tackle. Also, their tackles aren't playing well against the run, including Dexter Lawrence, who had a missed tackle right off the bat today in the running game. They don't have depth there. The defensive line they have 1 sack in the last 4 games, the Giants defense. Saul says, great job asking Dable about his job security. That question has to be asked, and it is a fair and great question. No doubt. I was shocked it took as long as it did for somebody to ask it. No one else apparently is willing to ask it. Yeah, I don't know what the chances are for Belichick. I think you got to make the phone call, though. How did Malik view his play tonight with the drops after call for the ball more? He said he was glad to get more involved, disappointed that they're losing games, wants to turn it around. But he seemed like he was in a better mood because he got the ball. But, should be about wins and losses. Lane says we should get Rex Ryan. No, you don't want Rex Ryan. Joe says, I wish we would call Gruden. Everyone deserves a second chance. I don't know. He comes up like a maniac in some of those videos, though. I'd be a little wary. Hunter wants a veteran head coach. If not, do whatever to bring in Ben Johnson. Let's see. Brett says, can Theo Johnson turn into a Kelsey, considering today he started catching the ball? Bellinger still should have had first dibs earlier in the season. No. Theo doesn't have the athleticism or the big playability or the wiggle of a Travis Kelsey to do that, no. Tariq says, what's taking so long with the firing of Joe Shane? Let's see. Lane says Shane is worse than Gettleman. Gettleman had Thomas, Dexter, Saquon, actual stars. Shane has made this team worse than ever, no doubt. Johnny says, hey, Pat, Shane drafted players with character concerns and maturity issues, and in the same breath, let the leaders of the team walk. Makes no sense. Yeah, it's like he thought he was acquiring better talent and getting rid of guys that were not his, and he was ignoring the character issues or the maturity issues, and now it's all snowballing on him. Hunter says it's sad the New York football Giants are settling for moral victories in 2024. I agree. Tariq says lame Shane is worse than Gettleman. Facts. Joey B, you're so funny. Cocaine is a hell of a drug. That's a Chappelle reference, no doubt. Brett says Belton was put on the field trying to get our first secondary interception. Yes, exactly. Joey B says, what's with the tight end we got from the Broncos, Dulcich? Interesting. That was a random claim for sure. The way I view it is, oh my goodness, like Joe Shane, could you spend any more mid-round picks on tight ends and not hit? 4th round pick on Daniel Bellinger, 3rd round pick trade for Darren Waller, including the contract of Darren Waller, 4th round pick on Theo Johnson, and this is a waiver claim of a 3rd round pick, I believe, of the Denver Broncos tight end. It's like they just can't get the position right. Just not drafting good players, selecting good players. Javi says, Pat, you're the only one on the beat with heart. Your peers are shook to ask the obvious job security question. Kudos to you. Thank you, Javi. Nick says, this team has no depth, period. Bad drafting has caught up to them. Cutta says, I think that's a big problem with the Giants. The team is so young. We don't have old veterans to teach everyone how to be a pro. Right. That's part of like the getting rid of the leaders and the vets and not replacing that character and that fabric of your team and culture. Saul says, to me, Shane and Dable act like they are the smartest guys in the room when they are clearly not. The Hard Knocks show proves what buffoons they really are. Scathing from Saul. Saul Goodman. Saul good, man. Daniel says, Pat, thank you for asking the tough questions. You're welcome, Daniel. Thank you for being here. 6, don't miss, says Joe drafted guys with upside, then guys who can create immediate impact. That's why he pushes that things take time. Hunter says, I don't think Theo has been that bad, though, especially last 6 games or so. He's okay. I mean, had a costly penalty or two, has had some drops. Mets News says, one last question. If the Giants win games down the stretch, do you think this regime stays in place, or do you think ownership makes a change? Feel better. Happy Thanksgiving. If they rattle off wins, then they could say, hey, look, it's looking brighter. But because like they're actually getting results, and they have teams like the Ravens and Eagles still on their schedule. You get wins in those games, you can obviously say it's a positive thing, but I don't have any confidence they're going to win another game. This is their 100th centennial season, by the way. Joey B says, Pat, get home safe, brother. Thanks for pushing through while sick for the fans. This is why I rock with you, bro. Happy Thanksgiving. Did you eat turducken? I ate about everything on the menu here in Dallas, but not turducken. Get some rest and feel better, says Barb. Thank you. Daniel, if they get fired, they would just bring in a new regime, and that's who would scout the quarterback. You want Robert Saleh as DC? Hunter said, Saleh's more like if you have good players, the scheme works. Hunter says, if Giants end up with pick 1, we need to trade back like the Bears did. Obviously, won't be as big of a return, but we are more than one player away. Get picks. Interesting. Brett says, Pat, this sums it all up. What if Daboll doesn't want leaders because of his personality? He wants everyone under his control. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, getting rid of everyone. Interesting theory. Tariq says, if Joe Shane had a kicker who was special and kicked 70-yard field goals with ease, he would let him walk and not pay him because of the going rate. More I'm thinking. What did the Giants see in Shane, says Javi? He seems in over his head. His best year was with Gettleman players. You know, I thought one of my biggest takeaways from Hard Knocks was seeing how he acts and talks about players and manages his staff. It made me think, like, wow, he had like a 4-hour or 5-hour or 2-day interview and they hired him. That's how I thought. I honestly. AJS says, Pat, do you think they will finally clean out everybody, Tim McDonald and Cap Guy too? I think Tim McDonald's here to stay. The salary cap team, I mean, they're obviously Teflon. They'll last through a hurricane, anything. I mean, clearly no accountability in certain departments while there's a lot of accountability in others. Would Brandon Brown be considered as a replacement? I would not. I think he's been party to it all. They could answer that question better than I could, though. But yeah, guys, remember, we're brought to you here by MyBookie, by Boom Chaga and Estate 98 Coffee. MyBookie, go to the link in my profile, click on it, make your first deposit, use the promo code PATSPICKS, that's PATSPICKS, and you'll get a 100% match on your first deposit of $50 or more all the way up to $1,000, plus a $10 casino chip. Went 3-0 last weekend with my Pat's Picks, 3-0, about to be 3-0 here on Thanksgiving Day with the Bears, Giants, and Packers covering. So you're welcome. But you got to get on the action now. We got this 100% match. So if you deposit $1,000, you get an extra $1,000 in your account. Now you have $2,000 to play with. Go get it. Go get it now while it's hot. MyBookie, bet anything, anytime, anywhere. Go to my social media. So like Instagram, YouTube, Threads, X, or Twitter, TikTok, and you click on those. So first of all, my handle on all those is PL on NFL. On Twitter, I'm P Leonard NYDN. But if you go there, if you see that link and click on it, you can find all of the great deals that MyBookie has to offer. It's really a great site. They have a lot going on there, a lot of different ways that you can bet on your favorite sports. And I've been hitting on the prop bets that I've been handing out to Kavonte Turpin over those receiving yards. I haven't seen Tua's numbers yet, but wondering if I hit on all the Tua unders as well. Let's see. He went, oh no. Tua smoked me on those props. Got me in the cold weather. Ouch. But, point holds. that's the best way to support our podcast and the Talkin' Ball Live with Pat Leonard podcast here, post-game Giants Cowboys from AT&T Stadium, is to support our sponsors like MyBookie. Also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, the natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. Can lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. BoomChaga.com. Use the code TalkinBall25, 25% off your first order. And so it's BoomChaga.com. Start feeling the difference today. You can use the QR code too. And Estate 98 Coffee, estate98.com/talkingball to get that exclusive offer for 80% off your first order on this specialty coffee concentrate that you can make in 10 seconds, hot or iced, and it's delicious. Guys, thank you so much. Brett says happy Thanksgiving, Pat. Thank you. Hunter says rest up, Pat. Have a good one and safe travels. And Saul says, Pat, keep up the good work and keep asking the tough questions. You're the man. As fans, we appreciate those questions. Thank you for saying that, Saul. Lastly, I want to thank all the super chatters. So Chris Spires, Patrick Evans, Daniel Hirsch, Jonathan Ryan, Joey B. Comedy, Most Illest, Keith Wilson Jr., let's see, Tommy Mills, Lane R., all you guys who dropped those super chats. And I'll leave you with this. Keith Wilson's, I think, hit it on the head when he said, how do you fix 2 botched drafts and multiple mishandled deals with stars? Why is there a belief that can fix this long-term setback? I think I go back and look at Hard Knocks and I think about Daboll with his feet on the coffee table in front of Steve Tisch and John Mara, the owners. And I think about Joe Shane chuckling as John Mara warned about letting Saquon go and said he didn't want him to go to the Eagles. And Shane said he didn't think he was going to go to the Eagles, and then he did. Those are the images that stick out to me. I think Keith hits the nail on the head when we say you just can't overcome mistakes like this. And with Saquon on the verge of potentially winning MVP and the Giants, the worst team in the NFL, and going nowhere fast, it's impossible to have any more confidence in this regime. And I do believe there's a good possibility that the next time I talk to you on Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard, we may have had a firing of a GM and a head coach. See you guys next time on Talkin' Ball Live with Pat Leonard. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for the support. Take care.